I had a student actually email a really perfect question for this evening, and I'm hoping to get two things in. We'll see how much time it takes. I would like to, if it's okay with everyone, go maybe to 8:40. If that doesn't work for you and your schedule, then you can just do your meditation, and when you feel like you're ready to go, you can go. Just because I think I would really like to do this other thing as well with you guys. For the student that sent the email, I'm just going to send you a personal message to see if you're okay with me sharing it. Because it was such a great question, and I don't have to say the person's name who sent it. I just want their permission to even share what they asked. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to pop over to the email, and I think it's something that will really resonate with all of you. So the question was, in these times, it can be hard to trust. Like if we surrender, there's this whole maelstrom of negative energy, deception, and uncertainty in the air. So how can we trust when the mind is constantly trying to figure out ways to make sure we're okay, safe, out of harm's way, ready for the future, etc.? How do we find that when the mind can get so loud? So I guess, how do we find essentially trust and surrender when the mind can be really loud? It's a really great question. And this is the flip side of the root chakra, which is faith. So the act of surrender is even the ability to consider surrendering to this moment in the world of how crazy it may be, and all of the difficulties of the world, and the possible deception and the possible unsafety, and still have the act of surrender, letting go into trust. That ability to allow that to happen is an act of faith, ultimately, right? Because there's nothing there that's going to be on the other side when you decide to say, sure, like, hey world, I'm going to do this. Can you give me some reassurance? And right now we're just not receiving that kind of reassurance in a direct way. This is very much on the subtle level, the act of the divine, or Mother Earth, or God, or whatever you wish to call it. And of course, our own natural flow of karma that's kind of running the show. So this act of surrender and landing into trust is ultimately coupled with faith, which is when the root chakra has been well cleared of karma and of some difficulties, and the energy, the prana, is overflowing in that chakra, which is the base wheel, or base chakra of the energetic system, which holds the primal energy, or kundalini energy. When we can fill that completely and it starts to overflow to the next one, and we've removed either the majority of our karma that sits in there, or all of the karma, what happens is we land in a complete and utter place of surrender and faith. Because the opposite of faith is fear and mistrust, right? So a part of this is the continuation of the meditation practice, because in order to land in faith, for most of us, we need to connect within, right? We need to constantly have that tie to the true nature of who you really are, the divinity within you of who you really are. And when we can embody and embrace and connect to this part of ourselves, the mind starts to fall away, and we remember ourselves of who we truly are. And we remember that we're being taken care of. And remember that each moment is perfect as it is. Even the moments we see challenging or difficult or scary, or there's deception, or there's issues about safety, when we connect to that inner space, we know we're being taken care of. We know we're connected to something bigger than me, myself, and I, and the individual. That being said, of course, we're living in a physical realm, and there are practical things that have to be taken care of, right? The mind is there in order to make sure that we are caring for ourselves in a very practical way. But we have to be careful that the ego doesn't intercept the intuition and the heart space, Yeah, because the ego is what cultivates fear and worry. I had a student ask me, and this is a question I get a lot, is how do you know the difference between listening to the heart and listening to the mind? How do you know the difference, right, between listening, like what is your intuition? How do you define what is intuition? And the answer I give for that is the intuition is in the space of the heart and there is no fear. If your answer is coming from a place of fear, it's not coming from your heart space. It's not coming from your intuition. It's coming from your ego and it's coming from the mind. If an answer comes up and it says, well, if you don't do this, then this is going to happen, or maybe this is going to happen, and it instills a place of worry or anxiety, that is also ego, because it's ultimately sourced from a place of fear, judgment, and what's the word? Punishment in a way, almost like punishment in a way. If you don't do this, then this might happen, or this will happen. So the way that we can move into a space of surrender is not only connecting in our meditations to remember who we truly are, to be in the space of the heart, to be in the space of our true nature, so that everything else, the scrambles and the worries and the incessant noise in the mind will start to slip away. And we can also start to see with more of a clear reality that the mind it's just trying to protect us, depending on our own personal patterns or shadows or traumas. There could be some patterns or some scars in there that are simply trying to put up places of protection, anxiety, or fear. They're just like little it's trying to protect you, right? And in a world right now where we feel like there's a lack of security and there's a lot of insecurity, those are going to be more likely to come up, and it can feel a lot harder to feel the heart space. That's why we need to connect every day. It's like plugging in your battery for your divinity and your heart space to remember that connection. If we only plug in, maybe once a week or once a month, how fast is that getting depleted? Then all of a sudden, all of the ego and the mind and the conditioning and the trauma and other people's projections and then the world's energy, it's like you've got this much stuff between you, like your true nature, and what you're actually being able to perceive in your conscious mind. So when we meditate, we start to peel these layers so we can reconnect to that source within, the breath being one of the best connections as an immediate doorway to who we truly are. So although we need to take care of practical things, we also need to build and learn discernment around those things so that, we're not being driven by fear in cultivating the things that we need, like being able to support ourselves in a career or something like that, have a job, have a roof over our head, the practical things of life that we need because we're in a physical body. How we go about approaching those things, we can approach them from a place of love, a place of faith, knowing that we're not alone, knowing that, in whatever terms you want to define, we're not alone is up to you, of course. And that there is something much bigger working in the background, not just in your own personal karma, that's like things from your previous life and this life of things that still need to play out, but also in the world's karma. And as these things need to play out, we all individually are going to respond to this world as it is in a unique way. And the other aspect of it is that we have a lot less control than we think we do. And being able to just learn to accept that is a huge lift off of the shoulders. Because when things happen, it's just like, it happened. How am I going to move forward with grace from this point? How am I going to move forward from love? So there's some aspects there of answering that question of a lot of it is the faith. It's the connection to our true nature that can reassure us, can bring love back into a space where there may be a lot of fear. And that inner connection, that inner remembrance also connects us to things that we can't see, the subtle energy things, the subtle energy guides and Davies or angels or whatever you wish to call them. There's a lot more in the cosmos that's working in the background. And we have a lot less control than we think we do. We have, we may be at a fork in our path, and we could take the right path or we could take the left path, and sure, we have a level of choice, but that path is still leading us to the same place. It's just sometimes the path may be a little easier and a little shorter if there's maybe some grace involved, and the other path may be a little bit more of a roundabout way to get it. I'm sure all of us have had that in our lives where we've kind of gone the roundabout way to get somewhere. So there is an aspect of being able to acknowledge that we don't necessarily have as much control as we think we do. And when we realize that, there's a bit of like a natural letting go that occurs because we stop fighting the natural flow of our lives so much because we're trying to control every little detail. But when we realize that we're in a river and it's going that way, and we're going whether we like it or not, we can either like fight by going upstream, or we could just be like, just let go and go, and then maybe just like manage where we're going in that river, then things just a lot easier on ourselves when we approach it from that place, and knowing that as we go down that river, if we need a lifeline, we'll be taken care of. That's a big aspect of as you deepen a meditative practice, that connection to your true nature is also a connection to what you want to call source, or the divine, or the cosmos, or the collective consciousness, the thing that unifies us all. And we see that there's much more at play in the world that our physical eyes can see. And that's where the mind starts to change and the consciousness starts to change, when we realize that the physical eyes see very little and there's a lot more going on. Does that answer the question? You can private message me if you want, if you feel like I didn't quite land on it. I'm gonna get back to my screen here. Good. Okay. I think that hopefully was helpful for other people too. It's a very common question naturally, right? Naturally. Okay. So the second section I wanted to move into, if you have more questions about that, feel free to pop them in the chat box. I'm happy to respond. I've had a lot of personal experience with this process of surrender in a time where there's a crazy amount of uncertainty. And I've always had a very sensitive perception of the future, meaning that a lot for the many years, I've known exactly where I was going, when I was supposed to do it, and I knew it was going to happen no matter what. And then we got into this year and it was just like static. It was like I was looking at a TV, it was static. It's very unusual for me to not basically know my own future. So that's a process of letting go into trust and faith. It's like, okay, like I'm blind, but I'm taken care of. Yeah, Kelly, exactly. So this other little piece is it's a little bit more fun. That one was a little bit more philosophical, and hopefully this will only take us 10 minutes so we can have our 40-minute meditation. And it's something that one of my teachers recently did in one of my other courses. And he's just so much fun. I just love him. And I really enjoyed doing this, so I wanted to share it with you guys. So it's just a little kind of end of the year fun to do. This is how I do when I read my oracle cards. I usually do a spread called Strength Heart Challenge. And it just looks at different aspects of one's life and then kind of pulls it all together so we can move forward with grace. So the first part is the strength aspect. And it's just, I'd like you to think about what your strengths were from this year. It was a difficult year, yeah. And sometimes it can be easy to think of all of the struggles we had. Because for all of us, I'm sure there were many different aspects of kinds of struggles. So I'd like you guys to write down or really contemplate maybe a word or a very short sentence of what you feel like your strength, your main strength, or your strengths were from this year. So it could be something like compassion or humor or acceptance or resilience. I like that one, resilience, or patience. That was one of my words, was patience. Had a lot of patience this year. And just kind of contemplate what you think your strength was. You know, we have our strengths and we have our weaknesses. We're born as human beings. We weren't born as human beings in this section of the realms, we would never be able to better ourselves. We would never be able to grow. So it's important to acknowledge our strengths. And if you feel like sharing, you can put your one word or sentence into the chat box for we can support each other as a community. I already told you mine. Mine was patience. So if you want to do a quick little click in there. Yeah, love and growth. Very nice. Creative. Awesome. Resilience. Dependability. Nice. Grace and growth. Lovely. You don't all have to share, by the way, if you don't feel like surrendering more. Yeah, this is a year of like heavy surrender. Thanks, Joanne. Resilience. Lovely. Okay. So from there, we're just going to do just a little short moment of connection. So you can put down your pencil, sit up nice and tall, and then we're going to put our one hand on the heart, one hand on the belly, and close our eyes. Just take a couple breaths into both of your hands. And I'd like you to ask yourself what your heart needs by saying, "Dear heart, what is it that I need to know?" Okay, what is it that I need to know? And just take a few deep breaths into that. And this is the connection to the intuition, the heart. The heart will always be very clear, kind, and direct and honest. Dear heart, what do I need to know? Just taking a few deep breaths into that. You might even bring up a visualization, could come up as a feeling or a sound or different kinds of words. And then you can open your eyes and write down anything that came up for you. If you're still working with the heart, you can continue. And then when you feel like you're ready to write, you can. If the mind's being really loud, just take very deep breaths and be patient and listen. And yes, you're welcome to respond in the chat box. I resonate very much with that one, Christina. I am taken care of. Yeah, I am enough. Mm-hmm. Again, it's merely an option to write in the chat box. It can be nice because then if we feel stuck, we're not sure, and then someone else pops something in there and you're like, oh, that's what I needed to see, or that's what I needed to hear. It can be nice. Mine was strength, that I am very strong, but also lots of sunshine. Like little beaming sunshine. Trust. Nice. Yeah. And then the last one's called challenge. Love. Anjali, thank you. Love. Last one's called challenge. So this one is about what was your biggest challenge or mountain this year that you had to climb? And it's not so much like, it's not a negative, sometimes I think we think of a challenge as a negative. It's not meant as a negative, it's meant as a challenge, as a part of our journey, and by acknowledging your challenge, you're ensuring that you're not tolerating any continuing negativity around that, and the ability to let go instead of bypassing our challenges. Because if we acknowledge it, then it allows us to move forward. However, if we have a big spiritual practice, sometimes it can feel like, oh, if I acknowledge it, then I'm not spiritual because I have a challenge. But that's not the case. It's actually when we don't want to acknowledge our challenges, or we're afraid of our challenges, or we steer away from them, that's the ego. Because the ego doesn't like to associate with anything that it doesn't make it feel good or feel weakness. That's actually basically a definition of a shadow. So what's the biggest challenge or mountain this year that you felt like was your biggest challenge or a mountain this year? So my personal one was uncertainty, because I've never not been able to see my own future. And some impatience, which is why I was developing patience. So part of this, acknowledging our challenge, is a way we can acknowledge our own shadows, things that we're carrying. When we can acknowledge our own shadows, they end up turning into gold, because then we can work with them and we can release them and let go. And then that part of us that maybe we were holding back before can be freed to enter our life in a positive way and bring abundance to our lives. So basically anything that your ego doesn't really want to associate with, because it will make it appear weak or feel weak, is a shadow. It's considered a shadow. Does anyone else want to share their challenge or their mountain that they were working over this year? Monique said negative energies. Yeah, that was a big one around the world. So if you're hypersensitive to that and taking things personally. Anjali, facing fears. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and setting boundaries. It was like a whole new world with boundaries this year, because we're all in new situation. Most of us were really new situations we'd never been in before, and having so much extra time for ourselves too. Concern for maintaining stress and pace of life work. Fears and worries. Yeah, some big challenges this year. Like it was major root chakra, right? Total security rip. It's like the rug from underneath you, whoosh, right? And you're like falling back and figuring out how to catch yourself. But I think we've all done a really wonderful job, and I hope that we've all really learned from that. So you can put these all together and you can see your strength, you can see what your heart is saying, and you can see your challenges and acknowledge those, and be really proud of yourself. Even if you're still working with them, we can still acknowledge and be proud of ourselves and the strength that we are providing by even, writing down, yeah, this is what I'm working with, and it's okay. Kaylee said, seeing how ego is trying to control my life and my mind. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this year, although it was extremely challenging, and we're moving towards the end of it, which is lovely, although we're still, a few months to go. It was about like just that crack in the consciousness, like the collective consciousness, to make that crack happen, to make people really reflect on their lives and what really nourished them, what doesn't nourish them, and also to really face fears in order to get through that root chakra, to really change the into higher consciousness levels. We need to be able to move from a place of fear into love, and move from a place of fear into faith and connection, which this year has been really huge. I don't think anyone's ever been so connected with all the Zoom classes and everything like that. Has opened up a whole new world of connection for people. Cindy said, managing how I manage others' negative stresses. Yeah, very big this year for sure too, because everyone responded in very different ways. Some people responded from trauma. Some people responded with PTSD responses, because even though it's not the same trauma, it still triggered previous traumas. And that can be really challenging. Maybe if we had family members or friends or partners who responded in ways we didn't expect, and that was a really new place to navigate. So this is just something nice that you guys can, you could even do this every month. If you feel like you're having a very difficult month or a very difficult week, you could do this, where you connect to your strength. We have to acknowledge, I am strong. It's not all bad. I am doing well in these areas. We can acknowledge our heart, connect to our heart. If the mind's like really, at us, stopping and connecting the heart and really asking the heart, like, what do I need to hear? And we'll always answer honestly. And if it answers in negativity or judgment or shame or guilt, it's not your heart. It always answers from a loving space of compassion and empathy. And then the challenge part is we still want to be able to acknowledge our challenge, if we are feeling that that's coming up for us. So this could be done every week, every month, every 6 months. It's a really lovely check-in and an acknowledgement to our inner and outer worlds.